Once Told Tales, as read by the author Rick Tobin.
Anthony and the Squiggly Wigglies. This is part 2. If you remember at the end of part 1, Anthony was just throwing his line into the water with a rubber worm which he had spit upon, which his Uncle Pete said, "No fish is going to bite that." Anthony had watched his uncle release the reel lock on the first pole, so he knew just what to do. He didn't have much strength, but he tossed the bobber and the worm lure about 8 feet away, just beyond the edge of the bank. His uncle shook his head as he baited his third pole with a real worm and threw it far out in another direction, so it did not get tangled in the other lines. Then he sat down in his chair next to his nephew and remained quiet as they watched the sun peep over the edge of the world. As the air heated, there were fewer splashes in the lake. In about a half hour, as swallows began to appear and dip into the water, Uncle Pete's pole dipped forward a little as the bobber disappeared, if only for a second, but below the still surface. Ripples from the bobber slowly reached the shoreline as Pete pointed to Anthony to watch carefully. The bobber repeated its dancing 2 more times. Pete walked slowly to the pipe support, withdrew the rod, and waited for the next bobber bounce, and pulled up hard on the rod, keeping the tip straight up above him. There was an immediate splash in the water. "Bring me the net, Anthony," Pete commanded his nephew in a hurried tone. Anthony had never seen his uncle so excited. "Now hold the net out, and I'll bring the fish right into the net. Then you bring in the net. Got it?" Anthony nodded his head as Pete turned the reel handle rapidly, while still keeping the rod straight up. In a few minutes, Anthony had a small silvery fish inside the big tangle of fishing net as he dragged it to the shore for his uncle to investigate. His uncle did not say much as he reached the bottom of his tackle box and removed the long-nosed pliers. He reached down to hold the small fish with his left hand as he squeezed the fish, making it open its mouth. And then he ripped out the hook before throwing the fish back into the lake. "Why did you throw him away, Uncle Pete?" Anthony asked, totally confused. "Too small, Anthony. They need to go back in the water to get bigger. That's one of the rules fishermen have to follow." "Oh," Anthony replied. "You mean like taking turns catching fish?" "I'm not sure what you mean, Anthony. The fish bite when they bite, and But there is no one listening to Pete as Anthony ran from the net over to his jumping pole. He pulled it out of the holster in the ground and immediately held the rod high, but he didn't wait for his uncle to bring the net. Anthony just held the rod close to his body and stepped slowly backward until a big fish was out of the water and far up on the bank past the chairs, where it could no longer get back into the lake as it flapped around. "Well, I'll be," said Pete as he let out a low whistle. "I've never seen the like of it. That's a big bass, bigger than I've ever caught here. I don't know what to say." "Can you take out the hook and save it to take home to Mom? We need help with food right now." "Sure," Pete said as he pulled out his pliers again. "I think I'll keep this rubber worm for good luck. Let's take this fish up to the truck and put it in the ice box I've got. It might be a good time to clean up a little and have something to eat. Aren't you a little hungry after fishing?" "That sounds good. I'm hungry. Did the fish feel hurt when you pulled that hook out? You sure didn't seem happy." "No, Anthony. He doesn't have any nerves in his mouth to feel pain. Besides, we're going to eat him later." "Oh, yeah, I forgot. I don't think I like being a fish." "Me either," Pete said as he put the fish in his catch box around his waist. "When we sit down for breakfast, how about you tell me more about this YouTube you watch? And is that where you learn to pull out a fish out of the water like that?" "Sure, Uncle Pete. Yeah, they showed me lots of things. I'll be glad to show you when you come to the house." "You got a deal, buddy." They walked to the truck, secured the fish on ice, and then opened their bag of food after washing their hands on disposable wipes. Pete reached in another pocket and pulled out a spare light stick. "I think you're a great fisherman. I'd like to award you with this light stick, Anthony. Use it if you are ever afraid in the dark." Anthony stuck it away in his jeans after thanking his uncle, just before tearing into his peanut butter and jelly sandwich. There were no more bites from the lake fish that day. When it got warmer, about 10 o'clock, more people began pushing into the space where Anthony and his uncle were fishing. Some would ask about how fishing was going. Some just said hello to Pete. A few pushed close to their lines, and then Pete asked them to please move further away. It was clear that it was time to leave. So the two adventurers took in their lines, gathered up all their gear and chairs, and then headed back to the truck to go back to Anthony's house. Pete took the ice chest into the house and showed Anthony's mom the big bass. She smiled with surprise as Anthony told her all about how he caught the giant. Pete didn't talk so much, but asked if he could come over for a fish dinner some night, and Anthony would show him how to use the internet and watch fishing lessons on YouTube. Anthony's mother agreed and said that Anthony's dad was coming home sooner than expected. That would be a good night to share the story again and have all the family together. Anthony asked, "Uncle Pete, could you do me a big favor? I'd like to have those big Squiggly Wigglies to bury in our garden. Would that be okay?" Anthony's mom gave a puzzled look to Pete as his eyes looked skyward, and he let out a big sigh. "Okay, big guy," he said finally. "Here, just give me the can back when I come over to look at your fishing on YouTube's. What a day." He pulled the can out and handed it to Anthony. With that, Uncle Pete waved goodbye after giving Anthony a big bear hug. That night, after supper and talking to his dad on the phone, Anthony walked outside in the family garden. There, near the sunflowers on the south side, he dug a small hole with a weeding shovel. Then he opened the worm box and shook all the nightcrawler worms into their new home. It was dark and a new place for them, so Anthony pulled out his light stick gift from Uncle Pete and made it glow. After setting it gently into the hole next to the worms, he told them, "This will keep you safe tonight so you can make a new home to sleep in without being scared. Thank you for helping me and our plants to grow. Welcome to our home." Anthony then covered them carefully with a pile of loose dirt next to his diggings. He looked up from behind him to find the Dipper and the North Star and made a wish that the worms would be happy and safe with the light he had buried with them. The next night, after helping his mother cook the fish he caught, Anthony decided to go outside and look at the stars. He forgot to tell his mother he was leaving. He was so excited about seeing the North Star. When he got outside, he realized he could not see the Dipper yet because the neighbors' trees were in his way. Anthony remembered there was a park with an open field somewhere down the street where the big kids went to play by themselves. He decided to take a short walk until he could see the Dipper and then make a wish again on the North Star for his dad to come home soon and share the fish dinner with him and his uncle. Anthony didn't tell his mother he was going to walk alone. He just forgot since he was so excited about making his wish. He also did not know how to read the street signs for the streets he passed that led to the park. Soon, he was at the end of the street and he found himself walking into the woods in a place he had never seen. He could not remember which way he came into the woods or how to get home. Suddenly, he was frightened and called out for help. No one answered. He was all alone and lost. Uncle Pete had told him once that if he ever got lost again, did not keep walking around. Stay put, he had told him. He had emphasized that by pushing hard down on Anthony's shoulders as he told him to sit down and be a statue until someone came for him. Anthony tried that, but he was crying so hard he began to forget to stay in one place. He called out for his mother, for anyone. There was only the sound of the wind and the trees in the dark forest. Anthony saw one small star far above him, and he asked the star if it would help him get back home. It did not answer. He knew it was not the secret North Star. There was no one to help Anthony get back home. Then suddenly, Anthony saw the ground move in front of him as a green light started to appear from the ground. Within a minute, many squiggly wigglies covered in green light formed an arrow for Anthony to follow. He was jumping for joy. He was so happy, but so surprised. The arrow pointed to a path Anthony had missed on his way into the woods. He could see it in the new light from his worm friends. He followed the path, and in less than an hour, he was back home, safe. His mother had tears in her eyes. There were police officers outside with several search dogs. He promised never to walk alone again, but he did not tell anyone about his friends, the Squiggly Wigglies. What he would remember was that he promised them for helping him he would never use them for fishing ever again.